Multiple large storms will be coming to the United States over the next week, and these will bring some problems, including the potential for severe weather, including damaging winds, large hail, and also a few tornadoes. In addition to this, we are watching very closely an area of development in the Western Caribbean Sea that could become our next big hurricane that will more than likely impact the United States. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the weather across the United States over the next 10 days, and we are going to begin with what's happening across the country this morning, which notice back over in Wyoming, we have the spinning trough that initiated a lot of showers and thunderstorms yesterday, and they've kind of continued here into the morning. And this is actually what's going to bring the potential for severe weather today and tomorrow to parts of the Great Plains and as well as the Midwest. And we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. But this isn't the only large storm that we're going to be talking about. If you look further back to the west near California, there is another trough over there, and there could be another one behind that one. And so we are going to be dealing with basically a train of storms over the next few days that is going to ride here across the northern tier of the country, which will bring the potential for severe weather over the next 7 days for those especially in the central and northern plains and as well as the Midwest. Now back over in the East Coast, we are dealing with some lingering showers from the remnants of that potential tropical cyclone the other day, but overall that thing's weakening out pretty quickly. Remainder of the country is relatively dry. We don't really have anything going on right now in the Caribbean Sea, but we do think that there will be a potential for development later into next week that could become something big, and we'll be talking more about that here in just a moment. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential for the next few days, and we'll begin with today, which is Wacky Weather Wednesday. We do currently have a large marginal threat for severe weather from the Texas Panhandle all the way back up into Minnesota and North Dakota. There's also a little small slight risk for severe weather from northeast Nebraska back into southwest Minnesota and eastern South Dakota. Now the main concern overall is going to be damaging winds and large hail. However, there will also be a potential for an isolated tornado threat, perhaps back over in this area that I just circled, so in that yellow shaded area. There also might be some sort of brief spin up outside of that, perhaps a little bit further to the north, but it looks pretty unlikely at this time. It's a very conditional threat, but it is a possibility. If there is something that looks concerning later today and we have to go live for it, we'll be live on the channel, so make sure that you are subscribed down below. Then once we go into Thursday, which is tossing trampolines on tall trees Thursday, we do have a slight risk for severe weather in Minnesota, northern Iowa, and western Wisconsin. And we also have a marginal threat that tails all the way down into parts of northern and central Oklahoma. Now the main concern for tomorrow is going to be damaging winds and large hail, but there will also be a potential for a few tornadoes, especially in eastern Minnesota and western Wisconsin during the mid to late afternoon and into the early evening hours. And I wouldn't even rule out an isolated spin up or a brief tornado somewhere from Kansas City all the way back into Iowa. It's a pretty good likelihood that we'll be live for this on Thursday, so make sure that you are subscribed to the channel down below. Now today's environment for severe weather is not super favorable, but we do have a lot of spin in the atmosphere today, which could lead to the potential for maybe some sort of isolated tornado threat back up in the northern plains. We even have some shear back down in areas like Nebraska that would be able to support maybe an isolated tornado. The problem really is going to be that there aren't going to be a whole lot of showers and thunderstorms out there today. This is what it looks like out there this morning. A lot of showers out there, and that's going to kind of stabilize the atmosphere for the remainder of the day. But if we do see any initiation just to the east of this trough, we could end up seeing some hail, wind, and maybe an isolated brief tornado somewhere in North Dakota or Minnesota. But just notice how there's really nothing firing up down here in South Dakota or even back into Nebraska. And that's going to be one of the biggest problems for today's severe weather setup. And back into the central plains, there will also be a threat for maybe a couple of isolated severe storms. But again, nothing more than hail and wind is early in the forecast today. Just a few pop-up showers and thunderstorms from Kansas back into Texas, maybe something in Iowa, but again, nothing really too concerning it looks like for now in those areas. Now, I think tomorrow is going to be a little bit bigger of a deal, and I do think we might be live tomorrow on this channel for severe weather coverage. So if you're not already, make sure to subscribe down below and click the bell icon so you're notified if and when we do go live. The reason why, though, is that we are going to have a bit more of an elevated tornado threat as we go into Thursday across parts of the Midwest, mainly in western Wisconsin, northern and central Iowa, and also back into southeastern Minnesota. Now, I don't think the tornado risk is the main concern. I think wind and hail will really be the main predominant concerns, and this is what the future radar looks like. So again, going into Thursday morning, just some showers. These are going to be elevated, meaning not really anything severe. Once we go closer to lunchtime, things are still relatively dry, but notice as we flip the switch closer to 3 to 4 o'clock, storms really fire up across the Wisconsin and Minnesota border, with the greatest concentration, I think, for severe weather being near Minneapolis back into western Wisconsin. I think this is going to be the area to watch for that greatest concern for mainly hail and wind, but any storms that can become semi or discrete will produce the potential for a isolated tornado or two. And notice how those storms by about 6 o'clock or so, they become a bit more linearized, and that'll produce more of a wind threat. This is the RRFS model just kind of continuing past that time frame. This is by 7 to 8 o'clock. Storms continue to roll to the east. Even have a few storms near Kansas City, so we might see a couple of hail or wind events down there. This is after midnight. Storms continue to push to the east across Wisconsin and eventually into western Illinois. But notice as we go into the overnight hours, those storms really die out, and we're kind of done with that severe weather threat by the time we get past midnight or so going into tomorrow night. So again, overall, not really too concerned, but I think there's just enough here to the point where we might have to go live tomorrow. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Now, the weather pattern across the United States is going to be highly driven towards this train of storms effect that we're going to be dealing with for the next several days, beginning with the storm that we currently have that's going to bring a little bit of severe weather today and perhaps tomorrow. And then our second storm right behind that is going to be a little bit larger, and I think this one will have a better shot at producing more of heavy rainfall across the central and northern plains and back into the Midwest this weekend, and as well as into early next week. We could see some severe weather out of this as well, so don't really kind of let your guard down yet on this, but I do think the risk of that does remain low as of right now. Once we go into Sunday, Monday, into Tuesday, we might get one more trough behind that until the GFS model kind of hints that this weather pattern is going to break a little bit into more of just a large trough, or maybe even some sort of bowling ball low back over in the southwest United States, and that would kind of leave it so that the weather pattern across most of the country is much drier. The problem with this weather pattern, though, as at least for right now, the timing indicates that we're going to have a trough that is going to dip all the way down to the southeast, and if we do get a tropical cyclone in the Gulf of Mexico next week, which is the current thinking right now, that could actually bring this trough into areas like Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, and it might even go up the East Coast. There's a couple of scenarios there, and that would not be good, especially if this does become a hurricane, which is my current thinking as of right now, despite this being over 7 days out from now. So definitely something to watch for. It is a trend that we're gonna have to watch for very closely, because any of this steering from the jet stream will definitely help to basically bring this up the East Coast. Here's what the GFS model is showing for the future radar over the next few days, beginning with Friday. Again, relatively dry across most of the country. I don't see there being really any severe weather on Friday. I think Saturday will be at least the return of some severe weather, whether that's just a marginal threat or a slight risk. It remains a little bit uncertain, but I do think we'll be watching the Central Plains on Saturday for some showers and thunderstorms. Once we go into Sunday, this starts to move more to the east. Notice again how there might be a couple of, isolated severe storms anywhere from Texas back into maybe Missouri. And then as we go into Monday, this moves into the Midwest, and it doesn't appear as if this is going to be a big deal in the Midwest aside from rain, and again, maybe an isolated risk for severe weather. But again, I'm not really too concerned about that right now. Once we go into Tuesday into Wednesday of next week, that eventually moves out to the east, and notice what the GFS model is currently showing. It is showing a big hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of models are showing this. There's really no way to deny it at this point. I know a lot of you are kind of asking me what are my personal thoughts on this actually happening and where it's going to go and all that. Well, I think that this is going to happen to some extent. I really do think we're going to get a tropical cyclone in the Gulf of Mexico next week, or in the very far western Atlantic Ocean, like just off the east coast of Florida or something like that. Either way, I think we're going to have something. It's more a matter of when this is going to happen and also the intensity and exactly where this is going to go. We don't really know right now. A lot of the models continue to bring this to Florida, but again, this is still about 7 days out from now, so there definitely could be some changes to the forecast. Either way, it definitely looks concerning. I do think that this could become one of the biggest hurricanes that we've seen so far this season, aside from Beryl. Beryl was definitely obviously very catastrophic, but I think that this is going to be something that's going to be talked about quite a bit here over the next several days. And by the way, the National Hurricane Center does have an area of development outlined in the Western Caribbean Sea for that area, but again, it's still probably not going to develop until at least Tuesday of next week. Here's what the rainfall looks like across the country over the next several days. This goes all the way until early next week, so Monday. Again, most of the rain is going to fall across areas in the Midwest and back through the Central Plains, pending that next trough, and then anywhere up and down the East Coast, we'll see anywhere from 1/10 of an inch of rain, perhaps up to 1 inch or 2 of rain over the next few days. Again, notice many areas, though, in the Midwest and as well as Central Plains getting plenty of rainfall. Areas like the Dixie Alley and Ohio Valley desperately need rainfall, and unfortunately, there's not much of that in the forecast over the next several days. Temperatures will continue to remain above average for the rest of this week across most of the country, and even next week, it looks like the same old, same old. I don't see there being any Arctic blast or anything like that here, at least for the rest of September. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.